We're making venison ragu right now. So we went ahead and shredded the venison shank meat off of the bone and cooled it down so it's easy for like me to touch without gloves. And what we were really doing is trying to get all of this connective tissue off of it. It's a lot easier to do when it is cooked rather than raw. I want to chop this meat up a little bit just so that it is easy to plate. It doesn't have to be perfect, because as it cooks, it will break down as well. If this was really hot, if we needed this today, like if I needed to rush it out, you could absolutely pull it out, shred it while it's still hot, and then just put gloves on. It makes it a little bit easier. The shank is a funny piece of meat because even though the meat pulls away like it would if it was a baby back rib or something, the meat itself still holds its shape. So it'll pull off of the bone and it'll be tender, but I mean, it holds its shape pretty well. So even if you wanted to just like put this on some potato puree or polenta or really anything, you could braise it fully, pull a piece of meat off of it, and then just like plate it boneless there on the plate. That's the nice thing. That's why I love these shanks. They're delicious, and then they just hold their shape really well. And it's super easy to tell when they're done. Just give it a little pull. If it pulls off of the bone, it's done. Yeah, usually about 3 hours is what we do. We are starting the ragu. This is another typical Piedmontese dish, usually served with pork or veal. In this case, we're gonna do a venison shank. We're just gonna melt some butter in the pan, and then we will add all of our diced vegetables to it. Carrots, leeks, onions, celery, and garlic. This one has a lot of vegetables in it. You can absolutely do this with just like, if you want some ground meat in there, if you have some, I don't know, short rib from the night before. But no, it doesn't have to be braised whatsoever. When we were creating this dish, we knew we wanted to get the venison shank in this one. And quite frankly, it's tough to break down the venison shank when it's raw still. So we thought about cooking it, imparting flavor that way. And then we're actually going to use the venison shank braise as part of this recipe as well. So we're just trying to sweat these vegetables out. We don't want a whole lot of color on them. It's at a low heat right now. We're kind of just getting them to be soft and almost translucent. I didn't do a very good job of cutting my onions right there, but it's okay. All of the vegetables are going to kind of like towards the end of the cooking process fall apart and be a little soft. So it is all good. Turn it up a little bit. At this point is when I also like to season it as well. A little bit of salt and pepper. There's a lot of the celery salt already on the shanks themselves, so there's no reason to add any more. The salt will also help it sweat out a little bit too. This specific dish is on our current tasting menu. It is Piedmontese inspired, which is not something that like we normally do. A lot of our tasting menus and just menu inspiration in general comes from whatever we've been eating or whatever we saw on TV or sometimes it's just in the middle of the night you wake up from your dead sleep being like, I want to have foie gras ice cream. But this one, this tasting menu specifically, we wanted to show inspiration from our last trip. So again, like I said before, our last trip in June was to Piedmont. And we wanted to make dishes that made us feel nostalgic about being there. Agnolotte del Plin and kind of this Taurine al Ragu were the biggest parts of that. And then for dessert, we do a hazelnut cake, which, if you know me, I only have a few rules, and one of those rules is no nuts in baked goods. But this one actually has nuts in it. That's how it's just traditionally made, so that's what we decided to do. Everything you do with a cake to make it light and fluffy and airy and delicious, you ruin, in my personal opinion, by putting nuts in it. So that's why I'm so far against nuts.
Oh, so like whole nuts.
Yeah, just even chopped up nuts, just anything baked inside of a cookie or a cake, I will not eat.
It sounds like you've had this opinion for a long time.
Yeah, I'm very, very opinionated on that, and then burnt crust on pizza. Those are my two biggest things that I'm just like opinionated about. Don't give me a pizza with burnt crust. I don't care if you did it on purpose. The vegetables are getting nice and soft right now. I think that we can add our venison shank. It's almost like the vegetables are getting blanched in here as well. You can see the celery is brighter, the carrots are brighter. The onions are a little more dull and starting to get a little translucent. So that's kind of like really what I'm looking for. So I'm gonna turn it up on high. We're almost trying to saute the venison itself. So all of that chopped up braised venison shank goes in there. We're just gonna stir it around. And kind of, we're really just letting this venison saute a little bit. The venison's not gonna be dry. You're not gonna overcook it. And like I said about it, it still holds its shape. So it's not gonna turn to mush. It's not gonna like, you're still gonna see like big pieces of it, even though we're cooking it for a couple hours. It's not gonna ruin the integrity of the meat. We're going to add a couple things to it. Turn the heat down. The only pain is we're gonna have to pull these out at the end of the cooking process. So always remember how many bay leaves you put in there and how much basil you put in there, because we're gonna have to pull them out at the end of it. So bay leaves and basil, and then a little bit of wine. So I turned the heat down so that again, the wine doesn't flare up and catch fire in here. And this one is just about a glass of wine.
Well, I should have bought a better one then.
You can drink the rest of this one. Heat's turning back up. Really, we just, again, don't want to let that splatter and then catch your nice kitchen on fire. So we're going to reduce the wine down slightly to au sec. Means almost dry. And you'll know it's reduced enough when there's almost no wine left, almost dry. I'm learning Italian, and I have been for a few years now, but there are still so many words that I don't know. I'll go to Italy, and I feel like I know a good amount of Italian, but I'll go to Italy, and I'll be like, what are you saying? No idea what you're saying. All right, so that's really what we're looking for, au sec. There's almost no wine left in it. Luckily, we had like a very large, wide pot, so the evaporation happens a lot faster. After the wine has almost fully evaporated, we're gonna add two more things and kind of just let this simmer for a little bit. So we have our sauce pomodoro, and then we have some of the braising liquid from the venison shank itself. Now, if you accidentally burnt the venison braising liquid or find you don't have enough, you can always use just some dark stock. And then we're gonna bring this back up to a simmer and let it go for another hour or so. We really want all the flavors to combine. We wanna make sure all the vegetables are fully cooked, the venison's fully cooked. I mean, it already is fully cooked, but just make sure it's nice and warm and heated through. And then it's also gonna reduce down a little bit as well. This ragu is gonna get slightly thicker, and that's really what we're looking for. Oof.